The Jedi had 25,000 years of records on the Sith, and they still sat across from Palpatine for over a decade without figuring it out. How does that actually happen? Because here's the thing, it's not just that they were arrogant, it's not that Palpatine was clever. Legends gives us something way more specific than that. The Jedi didn't miss Palpatine because they didn't know about the Sith. They missed him because everything they knew was about a version of the Sith that no longer existed. So let's start with the archives themselves, because this is where the whole thing begins to make sense. The archives held the history, wars, Sith empires, dark side teachings. All of it was there. The problem was that it wasn't complete. Before the Jedi ever set up on Coruscant, their main repository of knowledge was the Great Jedi Library on Ossus. That's where the deepest records on the dark side were kept, the foundational warnings that shaped how the Order understood its enemy. Then came the Sith War and the Kron supernova. 10 suns exploded and the shockwave obliterated Ossus. The Jedi grabbed whatever they could in the evacuation, but most of it was left behind. So from that point forward, the Jedi weren't studying a complete history of the Sith. They were studying pieces. A recovered fragment here, a damaged holocron there. They were trying to reconstruct an entire understanding of their enemy from whatever the disaster didn't take. And when your records are fractured, patterns break. A fallen Jedi stops looking like part of a repeating cycle and starts looking like an isolated incident. A Sith artifact becomes something dangerous to lock away, not a clue to study further. The Jedi weren't careless. They were operating with a damaged memory of their own past. And then you've got the Holocrons, which is where this gets even more complicated. A Sith holocron is not a book. A book just sits there until you open it. But a holocron talks to you. It has a gatekeeper, a preserved personality fragment of a Sith Lord sealed inside the crystal. That gatekeeper can answer your questions, decide what you're ready to learn, test your weaknesses, and give you just enough truth to keep you coming back. After the Great Hyperspace War, the Jedi Master Oden recovered a Sith holocron and brought it to the library on Ossus. The Jedi kept it restricted. Only a few senior masters had access, and that worked for a while, until Exar Kun. Kun was a gifted, ambitious Jedi. He wanted answers the Order wouldn't give him, so he killed Oden and took the Sith holocron. The very artifact the Jedi had locked away to protect themselves became the thing that created the next Sith Lord. That's the impossible position the archives put the Jedi in. If you preserve Sith knowledge, someone might access it and fall. If you hide it away, future Jedi might not recognize the threat when it appears in a new form. There's no third option that solves both problems, and the Jedi spent millennia bouncing between those two bad choices. What the Jedi could see clearly was the pattern of how their own people fell. The archives had it documented over and over. Ulic Qel-Droma thought he could infiltrate the enemy's world and come back as the same person. He believed his intentions were pure, and that would protect him. But the dark side doesn't need you to want evil. It just needs you to believe you're justified. Ulic became a Sith Lord, led an invasion against the Republic, and proved that walking into the darkness with good intentions doesn't mean you walk back out. Then you get Revan and Malak, who fell through a completely different door. The Mandalorian Wars were devastating the Outer Rim, and the Jedi Council refused to act. Revan believed the old rules were too slow, that someone had to do what the Jedi wouldn't. So Revan stepped into the breach, won the war, and discovered a Sith Empire waiting in the unknown regions. That's where their fall happened, not in a moment of weakness, but in the vacuum the Council left open. The Sith didn't create the crisis, they just waited for someone like Revan to fill it. And then there's Atris, a Jedi historian who believed you can't fight what you don't understand. After the Jedi Civil War, she gathered Jedi relics, Sith holocrons, and forbidden teachings in a secret academy. The holocrons didn't turn her into a Sith. They did something more subtle. They made her self-righteous, paranoid, certain she was the only one who could see clearly. That's the real danger. Sith knowledge didn't have to make every Jedi put on a black cloak and start cackling. Sometimes it only had to convince them they were the exception. The archives had all 4 of their stories, but knowing the names and stopping the pattern are 2 different things. Because while the Jedi were cataloging how their own fell to the dark side, Bane changed the Sith operating model. Everything in the Jedi archives about the Sith assumed one thing: the Sith operate in the open. You can find them, you can fight them. They have territory and troops and temples. Darth Bane ended that permanently. After the Sith nearly wiped themselves out through infighting, Bane created the rule of two: one master, one apprentice. That's it. The entire Sith Order compressed into two people, passing a single lineage through the shadows for 1,000 years. This wasn't a tactical adjustment, it was a complete redefinition of what the Sith were. For thousands of years, the Jedi had fought empires. They knew how to track an enemy with a flag, a fleet, and a fortress. But after Bane, those no longer existed. The Jedi Archives were built around Sith who left evidence behind. Bane's Sith were designed to leave almost none, and the Archives never caught up. So now you get to the prequel era, and you see the disaster coming from a mile away. Because if you go clue by clue, from the Jedi's perspective, not ours, we already know how the story ends. Every single thing they saw made sense on its own. Start with Maul. He shows up on Naboo, and honestly, he looks exactly like what the Archives said a Sith should look like. Red blade, pure aggression, he fights like a weapon, and he dies like one too. So the Jedi did what they were trained to do. They investigated. They debated whether he was the master or the apprentice until the trail went cold. And then Dooku. Dooku's the one that should have kept them up at night, because he wasn't some random fallen Jedi. He was Yoda's student, the guy who trained Qui-Gon Jinn, decades inside the Order, with universal respect, and then he just walks away, because he looked at the Republic and saw something rotting. And here's the thing, he wasn't wrong. The Senate was drowning in corruption. The Jedi Order had become paralyzed by its own bureaucracy. Dooku started saying out loud what a lot of Jedi were probably thinking privately. So when he left and started the Separatist movement, the Jedi didn't see a Sith. They saw a political idealist who went too far. That's the trap. Dooku's criticisms were valid. His complaints were specific. He didn't sound like a monster. He sounded like the only honest person in the room. That's why Dooku was so hard to read. The Archives prepared the Jedi for Sith who looked like conquerors, cultists, or warlords, not a former Jedi Master whose criticism of the Republic sounded painfully reasonable. Then the clone army drops out of nowhere. An army appears exactly when the Republic needs one, commissioned by a dead Jedi, paid for in secret, ready to deploy, and the Senate accepts it. The Jedi lead it, because what else are you gonna do? Say no and let the Separatists roll over the galaxy? The Jedi were looking for a Sith army moving against the Republic. They never expected the Sith to hand them an army. And then Palpatine. Palpatine didn't invade the Republic. He became it. He didn't tower over the Senate like some Sith Emperor from the old wars. He sat inside it. He worked within the system. He accumulated power through procedure, emergency measures, and the Jedi willingly handed him more authority because every time they asked themselves whether to trust him, the alternative looked like chaos. He looked like the only adult in the room. That's why the Jedi missed Palpatine sitting right in front of them. They weren't stupid. They were actively looking for the Sith, but they were looking for some Dark Lord declaring himself from a throne. Instead, Palpatine gave them paperwork, emergency powers, and committee meetings, a war they feel morally obligated to fight. And by the time the Jedi realize the Sith aren't outside the Republic attacking it, the Sith are the Republic. The Archives were full of warnings, full of proof that the Sith always come back, and Palpatine still wins, because he knew exactly what kind of monster the Jedi were trained to look for, and then he became something else.